Bacteriophages, or phages, as I like to call them, because we're beyond bacteria only. Phages are viruses that only infect microbes. They don't infect humans, although they're in humans. They're everywhere present. Everybody in science agrees that these phages are ubiquitous in nature. That means they're everywhere. They're the most prevalent species on the planet. There's so many that if they were the size of ladybugs, they'd completely cover the earth and be 31,000 miles deep. That's a lot of ladybugs. What if, when you get an infection, it already is infected with its own phages? So when you get staph, or when you have a strep infection, it entered the body already infected with its own phages. These are viruses that selectively will only infect a certain type of bacteria. So a strep phage will only infect a strep bacteria, and a staph phage will only do a staph bacteria. This is a battle that's been going on from the beginning of time between microbes.
Can you explain how phages work?
Phages land on a bacteria. They're kind of like an orbital lander, and they have a little thing that they stick into the bacteria and inject their phage DNA into the bacteria, which causes that host bacteria to start replicating more phages for it. So after 5,200 phages are produced inside that bacteria, the phages create an enzyme that just bursts the bacteria open and it dies. Now spilling all of those phages out into the body, and they go seek and find the next bacteria and start the process all over until they've killed about 40% of the bacteria in your body. So phages will farm the bacteria. They don't want to kill them all, because if they killed all of their host, there'd be nothing to replicate phages, right? Without that kind of bacteria. They only deal with their type of bacteria. So they'll kill about 40% of the bacteria and then stop killing them, stop even causing them to replicate more phages until that bacterial population has a chance to replenish its numbers. It's kind of smart of them, isn't it? And so that's the farming aspect. It sounds like a farmer. He maybe takes a lot of his herd to market, but he keeps his breeding stock typically. And that's kind of what they're doing to me. The other side of phages is, under the right situation, they say, they switch from this farming, which is called lysogenic activities. Lysogenic meaning injecting their genes into the bacteria and causing them to make more phages. They switch from that to go into lysis, or lytic activities, which is where that tweaked my mind. I was like, wow, so the right situation, these same phages will swarm the bacteria. Now and again, the swarming is a term that I kind of coined, because in my mind, I've kept honeybees, and I've unfortunately been the recipient of swarming of bees, because I never wore the protective garb, because I felt like if I could just be love, I could open the hives and do everything. And I got away with that for a long, long time, until I disrespected the bees. I opened it during work hours, which wasn't really good. And then I got stung one time, and I didn't have any protective anything on. And the bees swarmed because of the sting. They will do that. Once one sting has happened, then a bunch of them happen, right? Well, that swarming seems to be what the phages will do inside your body. If you could stimulate them to swarm, they will kill instead of do the lysogenic farming thing. They'll just kill them all of the infection. And this isn't something I've discovered. This is something that's well documented in the research. And so these were some of the initial epiphanies, that you have the phages already in your body. You don't need to get phages from outside the body to put it into your body. That's what everything has been up to this point, is like to find phages wherever bacteria are. So sewage is one of one of the places they look for new phages because it's so full of bacteria already in sewage. And so they've cataloged all these different kinds of phages that they have in libraries now, phages that they can match, hopefully, eventually, what phage should kill the bacteria in your blood or in your body. And I'm kind of like, okay, we're not doing that. We're saying, all the phages you need are already there. We just need to turn them into assassins, if you will, swarm and get them to kill. And if you could access the software of the body, which I've been doing for 25 years, and developing and tweaking and making better and better, maybe I could actually influence those phages, just those phages for the kind of infection that you have, and get your own body to heal itself. I mean, the phages are there already. I'm not putting something in, I'm putting the stimulation in, almost like a software program that programs those phages to go and swarm and kill all the infection wherever they are.
So far, has there been any type of bacteria that INPT cannot eliminate?
So far, we've been able to target mold, and fungi, and candida type yeasts, and all kinds of things, almost anything we've ever wanted to. So one of my favorite stories is a lady I tested, and according to my best technique still, the system that we use to access the software of your body, she tested as having Taenia solium. Now, this is a tapeworm from eating undercooked pork. It's not going to change what I'm going to do to have the test, a lab test, a stool test, or anything. And besides that, she'd had tons of testing prior. Again, no one had ever postulated this. This is what I mean. There's these little epiphanies that hit me where it's like, that inspired thought was like, I wonder if I could send phages to kill tapeworms. Now, these aren't little guys. A tapeworm can grow to be 30 feet long and live for 25 years in your body. I mean, just think of all the nasty things babies put in their mouth, and toddlers and children for that matter. I mean, dirty hands, and all of that can have all these tapeworm eggs and other kinds of parasites. I mean, we're animals. What do we take our animals to the vet for usually? Deworm them, right? Well, we should deworm ourselves 2 or 3 or 4 times a year. But this lady tested, according to my tests, as having these tapeworms, and she agreed to let me see if I could send phages after him. So I formulated the test, and made the INPT remedy, and gave it to her, and within 2 hours she said her belly started to swell. Not horribly, just weird looking. And she said she could feel this like little tapping from the inside of her belly, which only in retrospect was probably the worms flipping around and flopping around as they were being attacked. 3 hours after that, so that was at 2-hour mark. 3 hours later, she decided to do an enema to try to flush these things out. And out came 2 foot to 1.5 foot long tapeworms, and they were destroyed. It was so cool to see. And this lady did regular enemas. You would think maybe she would have seen parasites in the past. But she took a picture of them for me. And it was fascinating because I feel like when you send phages to kill bacteria, you only have your symptoms to go by that you really did what you said you did. But when you have a physical tapeworm, 2 of them come out in just 5 hours. That's pretty convincing that you're doing what you're saying you're doing. So that was a God thing as well, I feel like. But they're in a pharmaceutical that would kill tapeworms in 5 hours and get them to come out like that.
How do you know INPT is working?
Now we've done, dozens of different types of bacteria. We've never seen it not work. So we're in the process of documenting this with one of the only ways to document the phage activity is using it against Borrelia, which is the type of bacteria that causes Lyme disease. And of course, there's more infections, what are known as co-infections in Lyme disease, but there's only the one test that we can use to document phage activity in the world that I'm aware of, and that's at the Red Laboratories in Belgium. And they're using a test called the Phelix, Phelix. What they're looking for is the DNA of the phages themselves, not the bacteria, because to find the bacteria DNA using what's called a PCR test, it's very elusive because the bacteria are not just always everywhere present. They're in tissues, they're burrowing in, it's not easy to find them. So there's a lot of false negative tests on that type of testing for the bacteria. So what their idea was, if they could actually find the DNA of the Borrelia phage, remember, all the phages are selective in what they will infect. So Borrelia phages only infect Borrelia bacteria. So those are easy to detect. So to me, it was the most sensitive Lyme test, because and this is an important point about this, is if they kill all the host bacteria, the phages themselves die off within about 3 days, according to the research. They don't have to work their way out of your body. They don't have to be digested. I mean, it's a virus in the first place, the phages. But because I've heard people get all worried about that. It's like, how does maybe the phage will cause a disease in my body. I'm like, no, it doesn't infect the human body. It only infects that type of bacteria. And like we said, they have to farm them normally to make more phages. So with no bacteria left to farm them and make phages for them, they die off. So it's a beautiful way to treat. It's non-toxic. We've seen very little Herxheimer reactions. Now, Herxheimer, for those that don't know, a Herxheimer reaction is a worsening experienced usually with antibiotics. But it isn't the die-off. It is not the toxins. Herxes happen with natural products like botanicals and antibiotics on the prescription side of things, and it turns out that the bacteria, if you can imagine, it's being affected by that medicine. And it's going, I'm dying, but it's not dead, it's just dying. And so your own immune cells, like macrophages, come along like Pac-Man. If you remember the old video game Pac-Man, and it just comes up, it gobbles up this live bacteria, all right? And the bacteria uses genetic transference to actually cause your immune cell to start producing cytokines. Now that's a medical term for just these inflammatory. They promote inflammation throughout the body, molecules. And so that inflammatory cascade starts happening throughout the body as the bacteria are dying, not dead, but dying, right? So this is with antibiotics I'm talking about. That worsening is actually from your own body's response. Now contrast that now to the phages and how they kill bacteria. When you turn on these phages, they kill the bacteria so differently than an antibiotic that it looks like you put a grenade inside of the bacteria. If you see a picture of the bacteria in a petri dish being killed by a phage, it's just tons of tiny little particles. Well, obviously there's not going to be any cytokine storm, because by the time the Pac-Man comes along to gobble up the trash, there's no genetic transference from that dying bacteria, the one that's dying inside of there. All it is just your immune system cleaning up the mess. So you don't get that inflammation worsening, which is covered in the research. And I've written some posts about that link to the science that proves that it isn't this thing that we thought it was. And a lot of people just don't understand herxes. They'll say, oh, I had milk and I herxed. Or I took a bath and I herxed. And I'm like, no. With antibiotics, yes, you're going to herx horribly. One of the more popular ones is disulfiram right now, which I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but the realities are a lot of the people I've heard and I've treated here I mean, they just were hanging on for dear life with the promise that sometime at the end of the antibiotic, they might feel better if they lived to see that day, because they felt like death, they tell me. Contrast that with the idea of phages, which they're incredibly fast. You're not having to take it for months and years or cycle through antibiotics year after year or month after month, the way many of our patients have. And you don't have the die-off that you would expect. I mean, people say, oh, I don't want you to kill it off in 5 days because then I'm going to be worse. And I'm like, oh, no, it doesn't work that way. And this is why, okay? Because it's really almost counterintuitive to talk about, because of the fact that, patients are so trained to think that unless you're hurting horribly in a Herxheimer reaction, the medicine isn't working, which is what their doctor told them. It's like, oh, you didn't feel like horrible? Okay, well, let's change that. Let's change your dosage until you feel horrible. Because I really want you to feel horrible, because I don't have best technique to show me what I'm doing and whether it's needed, such as we have and developed. I get that. But it's like they don't have any way to know that the medicine is working. With the best technique, we can actually determine, number one, what's wrong and how to fix it, when it's working, when it stops working, all these different things. If you're going to be allergic, if you're going to be toxic, which is an impossibility with the INPT that we've developed, because there's nothing for your body to react against. It's pretty dramatic, the difference. So when you say this is one of my favorite innovations, you're absolutely right, because it's, I've never been more excited for people to come to the clinic.
Are you going to publish your results?
Absolutely, yes. And the interesting thing is, I was told I didn't even need an IRB research study for this, because it's not a drug and it's not a device that's being used. And it's kind of interesting because it's the scientific journals that need the IRB. They want to make sure that you've done your ethics correctly and things like that, in treating people. So the IRB is in place, and we're following those guidelines on that. But it is a fun thing to see all the research coming together, because proof is what you always want. And I remember one of my professors saying that you can't prove anything. You just say you're striving to validate something. Proof of concept isn't just in lab tests, though. It's the people getting well, which we're also seeing things that we'd never seen before in people, and is more rapid than we'd ever seen before. So there's the human side, and then there's the laboratory blood work side. Remember using that Felix test that's only offered by the Red Laboratories in Belgium. Up to this point, we've done over 60 blood tests on patients, and generally about 3 tests per person for this study. And that was one where we want to confirm initially with the first test that they actually did have the infection, that they do have the infection, right? Remember, because even if they'd been through years and years of antibiotics, with our best technique, we can still find out, in an adjunctive type way, whether or not the bacteria is still present. But that doesn't prove it to anybody, because that's not a primary diagnostic. And so the lab test, that first one, I want to see that you actually do indeed have Borrelia in your body. And again, if you didn't have Borrelia bacteria of any strain in your body, you wouldn't have any of the phages, because there's nothing to replicate the phages, and in 3 days after the last of that bacteria dies, they're dead too. So if you do have the Borrelia phages in your PCR test that they're going to be doing, that's that genetic test of your blood, you must have Borrelia in your body still. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to cause disease in a person, okay? Just health isn't, unfortunately, the absence of bacteria, because we all have potentially pathological bacteria in our body. But we really wouldn't want, if we had to, we would never look at Borrelia and say, oh, that's a normal flora of the body, and that's not going to do anything to you. In an ideal world, we would get rid of it. But there, up until this one type of blood test, there was never really a good way to see, did I get it all? You know, the doctor was really watching your symptoms, and those symptoms being horrible are often from the medicine reactions, not necessarily killing bacteria. And that leaves the person just at the mercy of more and more and more suffering. So that first Felix test we did for this research study was to show you do have the infection. Then we would give the INP treatment to the person and test you again 2 weeks later. So a total of not even really 2 weeks, because we start new patients on Mondays, and probably Wednesday of the second week, a lot of the time we were drawing the blood already. So not even 2 weeks. And just huge, like, negatives were coming back like crazy. Well, that was good, but the idea would also be, yeah, but did you get it all? Do you know you get it all? We did a third test that was 45 to 60 days after that second test showed you didn't have it anymore, because we wanted to document, okay, is it gone long term? And this is one of those things where in that 45 to 60 days, the bacteria population, if there was even a little few back, they would have repopulated by that time, and the phages would be back again. We did those third tests, and 100% of them have stayed negative long term. So that's exciting. We haven't published it yet, but the first draft has been written. And so we're going back and forth with the editors and sweetening it up and making sure it's the way it needs to be written. And so we're going to send that through the peer-reviewed scientific journals and stuff like that.
Explain your termite analogy.
People have been taught for so long that they would be well when their doctor could kill all these infections, that now that we can apparently, and it appears, say all the correct words, that we appear to be able to eliminate all those bacteria, and not just those, any kind that we've been able to target so far. We can only prove it with the Borrelia and the tapeworm. Now that we can do that, we have to re-educate these people to realize it's a lot like having termites in the wood of your house. If you catch it right away and there's not much wood damage, then you have not much to worry about, because you kill the termites, you go back to living a normal life, right? The termites being kind of like the Borrelia and all these other infections, which is, killing those infections is a wonderful thing. And if you could do it in like 5 days, which we're seeing, you would think, wow, why aren't I just magically well? Well, those are the times where the termites, getting back to that analogy, the termites had already destroyed your house to a large degree. The wood is just beyond repair, and any good stiff wind is still going to knock your house down or cause some damage. Stiff wind meaning all the challenges of life that cause your symptoms to come back again. It's the damage caused by infections, especially the chronic infections, that takes the longest. So this is the challenge that I have now, is educating people that it's like, if you have a lot of damage, it's going to take longer to heal. Even if all you had was a blister from wearing a new pair of shoes or something, I could cure you instantly by saying, don't wear those shoes anymore. I've eliminated the cause, but it's still going to take your body 4 to 6 weeks to completely heal the skin where that blister was, to the point to where you can't see it. That's saying you don't pick at it in the meantime, that it doesn't get infected in the meantime. It's even going to take longer in those situations. If you put that pair of shoes back on again, it's going to rub that place again, and it's going to make it even longer than 6 weeks. So imagine the damage caused to organs and glands, not to mention all the damage to systems that aren't just like tissue, but how the body regulates itself. All that epigenetic regulation of the body has to be adjusted as well, not just killing the infection. If people would remember that analogy of termites and say, yeah, it's great to kill the termites, but what follows is you're going to have to do the hard work of healing the tissues, repairing the damage that having that infection caused all those years, because that's where your symptoms are coming from, is the damage. They're not really coming from the bacteria itself. I mean, it's like some people seem to think the bacteria are the cause of their symptoms. Yes, they are, in the same way the termites are the cause of the damage, but it's the damage that enables your symptom to keep going and going and going. Yeah, very many people feel like their body is their house, and it's very unlivable. So that's why it takes so long, and that's why our systems are very unique in the industry. That, a lot of doctors, they're trying to see a lot of patients. We're only trying to see a few, but give them the maximum applied effort to get them completely back to life without having to take any kind of pills. I mean, there's plenty of doctors selling you supplements on the internet. I don't think you can find one blog that I'm trying to sell you a remedy, because my specialty, the specialty of the clinic, is chronic illness. And there isn't any way I could just say, hey, take more vitamin D. That's all you need is more vitamin D, or take LDI, or take this, or take that. Because, I mean, sometimes the best thing I think I do is get rid of all this stuff that they've been taking, and streamline what they need to be taking, and then their body can unlock. A lot of the time I make the analogy, and I like analogies and parables and things like that, because it really communicates it. It's like if health was something behind a big bank vault door, one of those kind of 29 lock rotating combinations or digital locks, right? You can have a lot of the right numbers, but if you don't have all the numbers, that door is still not going to unlock. Okay? You have to have all the numbers, but not even just all the numbers, but those numbers have to be in the right order. And that is very much, the body is way more complex than just a simple bank vault door, which isn't simple at all. And so that's the challenge, is to streamline, get everything using all the right tools. Like if you walk into our treatment room, the first word generally is wow, because it's all that magic. I shouldn't even use the word magic, because it's not magic, it's science. But all of that science brought to bear in each of the treatment rooms. And that's where it happens. And so your doctor is spending an hour a day, every single day of the week, other than Saturday and Sunday. And we start all new patients on Mondays, so that we have the entire week to process through all the biggest issues. Those really blatant things that we're going to find. And we have that whole week to get you on therapies, because you're going to be on therapies that just support the body's healing process. That's important to understand. What happens in the treatment room is where it really happens. What happens in therapies just supports that, okay? Makes it to where we're trying to get all those numbers and therapies, that bank vault door to open as quickly as possible. So you're in the clinic for a total of 4 or 5 hours a day, Monday through Friday, before you even hit that weekend, that first weekend, so that we get enough healing that weekend is good, hopefully. And then that second week is a lot of the really cooler things, the more fine-tuning, the deeper innovations that I developed. It's a whole different reality when you come to this clinic than, say, I don't know, I hear some of our competitors and they're like 4.5 hours a day on IVs. IVs are fine for what they are, but they're kind of sledgehammer as opposed to that velvet glove that, that real tweaking of the body that chronic illness really needs. You don't need to, as they said when I was in the military, beat it to fit and paint it to match. That's that sledgehammer that sometimes IVs are. Now we use IVs here in this clinic. We have a physician that comes in and actually orchestrates the IVs and things. But again, it's not like we're sitting here going, oh, that IV is going to fix you. Sometimes it's just more isn't better. And a lot of our patients are so sensitive that they can't handle those kinds of things anyway. So, like I say, I want to give people an understanding of the totality of what happens here and why it works so good.